All right, joining me now is the Arizona Secretary of State, Adrian Fontes, who has just learned that the Associated Press has called Alexander Kolodin as his opponent, his Republican opponent in the race in November. Secretary of State, good to see you again. Thank you for being with us.
Always good to talk to you, Ali. How you doing tonight?
I'm good. It was a clean sweep of election deniers tonight in your state, which is really complicated and interesting because what it does do is it splits up Republicans in your state, some of whom supported you, a Democrat, in your election because they didn't really buy into this election denial nonsense. So the Republicans in your state continue to not have a clear path forward.
Well, look, election denialism, as I've always indicated, is bad for business. I mean, who wants to invest in a community or a state that is run by folks who don't want to handle facts, who are unpredictable and operate on the whim of somebody in Washington, D.C.? That's not what folks want to invest in, whether you're in business or education, whether you're in science or technology. And Arizona's, the Silicon Desert is growing. So folks want folks that to govern who are going to do it well, who are going to be reasonable, and who aren't going to be, a little bit off kilter. And that's what this race is going to be about. Mr. Kolodin in the legislature has repeatedly wanted to absolutely decimate ballot by mail voting and force Arizonans to stand in long lines to vote. And when you think about that, we're talking about rural Arizonans, veterans, older Americans, many of whom live in assisted living homes, may not have the transportation, and they may not be able to stand in long lines. And so this is just an anti-voter candidate for Secretary of State, and I don't think Arizona's going to buy off on it. And if folks want to support me, they can go to electfontes.com. We're gonna win this race against this election denier, just like we did 4 years ago against that other one.
Let's just talk about, I'm going to talk about it a little bit later, this voting by mail thing. Arizonans have trusted this for more than 3 decades.
Elliot, was invented by the Republicans here in Arizona. I mean, this went through a Republican legislature with a Republican governor. And guess what? Look at the percentage of ballot by mail votes in this primary. And I think it's
tonight 87% or something?
Oh, yeah. It's like we were predicting close to 90%. Now, these are the party faithful. These are Republican party faithful, and it's pretty even percentage-wise party to party. So, the notion that Arizona wants to elect a Secretary of State who wants to force people to stand in line is just bonkers. We've done everything we could to increase transparency and access to ballot by mail. And as long as I'm the Secretary of State, Arizonans will continue to be able to have secure, accountable, fair elections and vote by mail.
So let me ask you this. I'm sure you would have run a good campaign however it went. But if Gina Swoboda had won, she's a respect the law sort of person. Would that have complicated your election by virtue of the fact that there were Republicans who like you because you're the guy who believes in the sanctity of elections and running them properly and auditing them properly? But I think your hand came out pretty well tonight.
Yeah, well, our hand came out pretty well, but it wouldn't have really mattered, Gina Swoboda has spent time in elections administration, but she was the first plaintiff in the Kraken lawsuits back after the 2020 election here in Arizona. She's been 3 times endorsed by Donald Trump. This is the same crowd in a different package. And what we represent is stability. We represent normalcy. We represent the rule of law and folks actually wanting to hear the consent of the governed because that's where the power derives from. We hearken back 250 years to that declaration that says that's where the government gets its power from. And I think the other side, particularly with those 2 candidates and certainly the one that they nominated, they don't want everybody to vote. And we've seen it coming out of Washington, D.C., with the president trying to choose his own voters. We will continue to stand firm for every Arizona voter, regardless of what the outcomes are. And, Allie, you know as well as anybody else, I can separate my duty and my opinion. In 2020, look, I oversaw the election in Maricopa County that was my own defeat. And I didn't complain because the will of the people is much more important than my political opinion.
Talk to me about safety and security, which has now become I was off for a couple of weeks, and I wake up to find out that Donald Trump is now making this midterm election about election security. Again, you invented this widespread mail-in ballot in Arizona. It was widely accepted. It was done by Republicans. I didn't think this little engine of election denialism had this much gas in it, but apparently it does.
Well, it's some of those folks that help us put the AZ in crazy. And I will say that most Arizonans reject the notion, up to this point particularly, that we have any problems in our elections. We're doing fine, thank you very much. And the accusations, allegations, mythologies, lies, call them what you will, coming out of Washington, D.C., are really only to placate one person's grievance over his 2020 loss in the presidential race to Joe Biden. And it's really kind of embarrassing for a lot of these folks, I think, to continue on this. We have seen election deniers lose over and over and over again here in Arizona. We've got a gubernatorial candidate now in Andy Biggs who's going to lose to Katie Hobbs. He was a J6er. He was one of the organizers of that thing. And the attorney general's race has got another guy who wants to kill ballot by mail. And he's another one of these folks who is, of the same ilk. We've got us a situation in Arizona where we're not looking all the way past, like, at this stage, this election. Nobody is measuring the curtains. We're going to run our races as hard as we have run in the past. We're going to make sure that we speak to the Arizona voters on all of the issues that we have to deal with. And we're going to make sure, as far as I'm concerned, that every voter can vote the way they want to right here in the Grand Canyon State, because it's up to them, not Alexander Kolodin.
Arizona Secretary of State Adrian Fontes, thank you for joining us tonight.